Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to MTGO Traders. My name is Taryn, and this is the Rivals of Ixalan set review for green. So I originally had a green shirt on for this original recording, but it got scrapped, so I have to do it now with just a gray shirt. Hope that's okay, guys. So far, though, in Rivals of Ixalan, we've had a ton of really powerful cards in different colors. Can't wait to get into green, but of course, before I get into it, make sure to like the video if you like it, and subscribe to the channel. It helps us out a lot, and helps the channel grow. But without further ado, let's get right into it. We have Aggressive Urge for 2 mana. Instant target creature gets +1/+1 until end of turn, and draw a card. In Draft Unlimited, this is a great just cantrip. Not bad. Again, it's not an official cantrip because you don't, sift through, like, draw a discard. You just draw a card, and you may have the ability to, actually kill a creature on your opponent's side of the field. I like this card a lot, especially if you have a lot of top-tier creatures in your deck, and you need ways to get to them quickly, and this card does that very well. This is probably a 13th or 12th slot for me in Draft and Sealed. This card will not get played at all in Standard, though, sadly. Moving on here, we have Kickoff. Is that how you pronounce it, I guess? 4 mana, 2/5 dinosaur with Enrage. Whenever Kickoff is dealt damage, untap target permanent. This is incredibly interesting and feels like it could be something that could be, like abused in Standard, but being for 4 mana, I don't really think so. If this was 2 mana, maybe, but for 4 mana, this is kind of expensive. I do think in Draft and Sealed, though, a 2/5 is fairly good. A 5 toughness is awesome for having a 14 to 15 slot, and being able to, take damage and also untap an attacker you just, attacked with is very good too. But again, this card won't see any kind of Standard play due to just how weird it is and how expensive it is. Next up here, we have Cherish Hatchling, a 2 mana 2/1 dinosaur. I love the art of this one, by the way. When Cherish Hatchling dies, you may cast dinosaur spells this turn as though they had flash, and whenever you cast a dinosaur spell this turn, it gains when this creature enters the battlefield, you may have it fight another target creature. I love this creature for Draft Sealed and probably even Standard, especially with all the Enrage mechanics we have in Standard right now. We have a lot of ways to kind of trigger it on our side of the field, kind of on our terms, and with the amount of ramp going on in Standard at the moment, as well as Draft and Sealed, I feel like Cherish Hatchling will just basically be a flash enabler as well as a removal spell for multiple creatures on your opponent's side of the field. So I do think in Draft Sealed and even Standard, if you do get into this in Draft and Sealed for your picks and you're in like the dinosaur archetype, you definitely want to grab 1 or 2 of these. Moving on here, we have Colossal Dread. This is a reprint from original Ixalan, a 6 mana 6/6 with trample. Very good, very high on your curve, but it's going to be a huge bomb if it comes in and does not get removed. Colossal Dreadmaw ended a lot of matches for me in Draft and Sealed in Ixalan, and I feel like Colossal Dreadmaw will also do quite well in Rivals of Ixalan Draft as well. Again, this is a card that will not see any kind of Standard play. It's straightly just for Draft and Sealed. Next up here, we have Crested Hardcaller, a 5 mana 3/3 dinosaur with trample. When Crested Hardcaller enters the battlefield, create a 3/3 green dinosaur token with trample. A 5 mana 3/3 with trample that creates a 3/3 with trample is actually very good in Draft and Sealed, and it's even uncommon. It's basically Register Alpha, but not a 4/4, which is fine. It's also in mono green, which is very good too. I think if you're drafting into dinosaurs or need a big bomb near the end of the game, making 2 3/3s with trample is quite good. Again, this is a card that will never see Standard play, but in Draft and Sealed, this card is a fantastic bomb for us and a great way to go wide against a larger than normal or maybe just a mid-range strategy. Next up here, we have Deeproot Elite. This is a 2 mana rare 1/1. Whenever another merfolk enters the battlefield under your control, put a +1/+1 counter on target merfolk you control. Deeproot Elite is very good. I do think it'll probably see some Standard brew around play. I think in Draft and Sealed, this card can go bananas and become a 2/2, a 3/3, a 4/4, and so on. Or maybe just, widen your board state with the more merfolks you have on your side of the field. I do think there is some real possibility with this card, especially in a very low to the ground strategy. However, the problem, of course, is it's a 1/1, so it does die like immediately if you don't really have a strategy going off turn over turn. So I think that is the biggest drawback, and that's kind of the drawback of a lot of the merfolk right now. There's really not a lot of protection or evasion from them, with the exception of the hexproof creatures. But I do think Deeproot Elite, if you do get into a lot of merfolk in Draft and Sealed, this card is amazing. If you don't, this card is probably just bad. Moving on here for us, we have Enter the Unknown, a 1 mana sorcery. Target creature you control explores, and you may play an additional land this turn. Playing the additional land this turn is actually very, very good, and being able to have your creature explore, possibly getting you either another land to play, or just getting it a +1/+1 counter is good too. While I do think this is probably just in the mid-tier range as far as cards in Draft and Sealed, I do think it's very good and can be fantastic in a dinosaur strategy or a strategy where you need a lot of mana. And who knows, this card might see some Standard play thanks to the you may play additional land this turn. turn. I think that's a really good idea. Moving on here, we have Forerunner of the Heralds, a 4-mana 3/2 Merfolk Scout. When Forerunner of the Heralds enters the battlefield, you may search your library for a Merfolk card, reveal it, then shuffle your library and put that card on top of it. Whenever another Merfolk enters the battlefield under your control, put a +1/+1 counter on Merfolk of the Heralds. In Draft and Sealed, this is a bomb for you if you're in the Merfolk build. I think this card is very good. It's a tutor for you, and it can also grow itself turn over turn as you play your Merfolk. In Standard, though, I'm not really sure if this card will see a lot of play. I feel like the Merfolk deck itself is really low to the ground and really needs some longevity, and not really a tutor as so much as just more Merfolks in general that are low to the ground. I think this card is really fun, though, in Draft and Sealed. Next up here, we have one of the cards that was spoiled a long time ago. This is Galta Primal Hunger, a 12-mana 12/12 legendary creature Elder Dinosaur, and it costs X less to cast, where X is the total power of creatures you control. It has Trample. In a Draft and Sealed strategy, this will probably just be a 6-mana 12/12 with Trample, which is amazing. In Standard, this might just be like a 2-mana 12/12, depending on how your kind of situation is going in the actual Standard Dinosaur build. I think this card is very good. Sadly, this card doesn't have like haste or evasion or anything like that, but just having 12/12 and Trample is ridiculous by itself, especially if it can get in a little bit early. Moving on here, we have Gilt Grove Stalker, a 2-mana 2/1 Merfolk Warrior. Gilt Grove Stalker can be blocked by creatures with 2 or less, so this is an interesting card for us. Early game advantage in Draft and Sealed. This won't see any kind of Standard play, I don't think. Maybe, it really depends on the actual meta once we get into Rivals next week. But I do think in Draft and Sealed, this card is actually quite good at getting in like 2 or 4 points of damage early in the game. It is a great way of getting around like, you know, that 2/5 dinosaur we just talked about a minute ago, because it's unblockable thanks to that. I think that's a really good idea for this one. Next up here, we have Hardy Veteran, a 2-mana 2/2 human warrior. As long as it's your turn, Hardy Veteran gets +0/+2, so a 2/4 for 2 if it's on your turn. This is basically a great way to attack on every single turn. I feel like this is going to be a really high pick for you if you're in green or in dinosaurs or really just in green in general. I think this is fantastic on curve at being able to just kind of attack in against your opponent with really no fear of losing your creature at all. A 2/4 for 2 swinging in on turn 3 is amazing and should be looked at really highly and picked really highly in Draft and Sealed. However, in Standard, this card just does not do enough. Moving on from this, we have Hunt the Weak. This is a 4-mana sorcery. Put a +1/+1 counter on target creature you control. Then that creature fights target creature you don't control. I believe this card was reprinted in the Kaladesh block. I'm not entirely sure if it was or not. It's somewhere in there. It's still in Standard. I know this is a reprint that's still in Standard right now. Either way, this is supreme removal in Draft and Sealed. You probably won't play this at all in Standard, obviously. But in Draft and Sealed, this is great removal and a great way to kind of build your board presence as well as remove their board presence. A high pick for removal in green. Next up here, we have Jade Bearer. This is a 1-mana 1/1 Merfolk Shaman. When Jade Bearer enters the battlefield, put a +1/+1 counter on another target Merfolk you control. I really like this creature here, especially for Draft Sealed and probably even Standard, just because of how fast it is and how like effective it is at being able to make your board state larger. A 1-mana 1/1 is not terrible. It's not fantastic. It's just kind of like in the middle there. But being able to pump up your board state with another Merfolk does make this probably a turn 2 1/1, which isn't bad. But it does give it longevity and flexibility towards the mid to late game. And I really do enjoy that, especially in Draft and Sealed. And I think I'm going to probably brew around this in Standard a lot too, just because I like it, I love the art, and I like the ability here. Moving on, we have Jcraft Artisan, a 4-mana 3/3 Merfolk Shaman. When Jcraft Artisan enters the battlefield, target creature gets +2/+2 until end of turn. This is a 4-mana 3/3 that pumps another creature, and I think that's really good on the curve. And thanks to it being a common, you'll probably see it quite a bit in Draft and Sealed. I do think you won't see this at all in Standard. It just doesn't do enough. It just doesn't have like that flexibility to go forward in Standard. It just doesn't have like, you know, the staying power, obviously. But I do think in Draft and Sealed, this card is quite good. It could be a great 14th or 15th pick in Draft and Sealed. Moving on here, we have Jlight Ranger, a 3-mana rare 2/1 Merfolk Scout. When Jlight Ranger enters the battlefield, it explores, then it explores again. This is an all-star pick in Draft and Sealed if you're in the Merfolk shell. And in Standard, this card is ridiculously powerful, especially in a Winding Constrictor strategy. I cannot wait to build that deck, and I cannot wait to test out Jlight Ranger. I truly do think that that deck is going to go places, and Jlight Ranger is going to be definitely in it. Having the possibility to be a 6/5 on turn 3 is insane, and I can't wait to try it out. Again, this is a rare, so you're going to get into it very rarely, obviously. Rarely, you get it? But it's very good, and I think you'll like it a lot in Draft and Sealed especially. Moving on here, we have Jungleborn Pioneer, a 3-mana 2/2 Merfolk Scout. When Jungleborn Pioneer enters the battlefield, create a 1/1 blue Merfolk creature token with hexproof. This is going to be an all-star pick for you as well in the Merfolk build, especially if you're in green too. A 3-mana 2/2 is not fantastic, but a 3-mana 2/2 that makes a 1/1 with hexproof is amazing at being able to to provide board presence, as well as being able to provide creatures that are hard to deal with removal, so you can put on your enchantment auras that you have in your deck. And again, it is a common for you, so I think you'll be pulling into this quite a bit in Draft and Sealed. Probably won't see any kind of standard play though, it's a little too slow. Next up here we have Knight of the Stampede, a 4-mana 2/4 human knight. Dinosaur spells you cast cost 2 less to cast. In standard, this card probably won't see any play. It is 4 mana for a 2/4, but in Draft and Sealed, this card is going to basically turn on all of your dinosaurs on like turn 4 and make all of your dinosaurs playable the following turn. And since it does have 4 toughness, it does kind of guarantee that it's going to survive at least one turn before you either block with it or it dies to something larger. I think this card is amazing, and if you're in the dinosaur build in Draft and Sealed, you definitely want to pull into this for sure. Moving on here, we have Naturalized, a 2-mana instant, destroy target artifact or enchantment. It's back in standard, or did it ever leave standard? I'm not really sure. I think it left standard, and now it's back. Naturalized is very good at being able to remove artifacts and enchantments. It's very simple, very effective, very straightforward, and you probably pull into 1 or 2 of them in Draft and Sealed, but in standard, this will probably be a great sideboard inclusion going forward. For a while, we had Appetite for the Unnatural to do the same thing. It did gain you 3 life, but I feel like Naturalized is a bit better, especially because it's lower on the curve. Next up here, we have Oraska Freelback. This is a 3-mana 4/2 dinosaur, and that's it. This card is kind of bad. I do think making a 4/2 on turn 3 is good, and attacking in for 4 on turn 4 is good, but the 2 toughness is what really kind of makes it for me. I sort of wish they had just done a colorless and 2 green mana instead of 2 colorless and 1 green mana, just to make sure it was a 4/3 instead of a 4/2. But it is a common, so you will see them quite often, and it does have the ability to, you know, trade up against some other larger creatures. And of course, you won't see this in standard at all. Moving on here, we have Overgrown Armosaur. This is a 5-mana 4/4 dinosaur with enrage. Whenever Overgrown Armosaur is dealt damage, create a 1/1 green sapperling creature token. A 5-mana 4/4 that creates a 1/1 whenever it gets blocked is kind of good. It creates board presence, it creates power going towards your opponent. It's all good all around, especially for a common. If you need a top-end bomb in green, this is probably a card you want to get into, especially if you have any kind of red enrage mechanic triggers to make this thing go off. Making 1/1/1 or 2/1/1s or 3/1/1s turn over turn on your side of the field is very fun. And of course, because it's a 4/4, it's basically going to have to die in combat or to a like 5-mana removal spell or 4-mana removal spell. Overgrown Armosaur is awesome, and I can't wait to pull into it if I'm in green. Next up here, we have Path to Discovery, a 4-mana enchantment. Whenever a creature enters the battlefield under your control, it explores. That's awesome. I do think this is probably a bit too expensive for like standard maybe. This might be a brew around, like kitchen table style card in standard. I feel like this card will probably see more play in Commander, honestly. But in Draft and Sealed, if you do get into this, this is actually quite fun as well, because you do have the ability to last a bit longer in Draft and Sealed, so I feel like Path of Discovery might be a bit more important at being able to either filter through your deck for cards, for lands, or making your creatures a bit bigger. And I do think making a 2/2 versus a 2/2 with a +1/+1 counter on it, awesome. It can definitely mean a win or lose in a match sometimes. Those +1/+1 counters are very important. I love this card, but I do think it probably won't see any kind of particularly strong standard play. Moving on here, we have Plummet, a 2-mana instant, destroy target creature with flying. Super simple, super straight to the point, played everywhere. You're going to pull into 1 or 2 of them, especially in Draft and Sealed, for your sideboard, just in case you're up against a more flyer-heavy deck. And I think in standard, this will probably be sideboard cards once again, going up against cards especially like Glorybringer. Moving on here, we have Polyraptor, an 8-mana 5/5 dinosaur with enrage. Whenever Polyraptor is dealt damage, create a token that's a copy of Polyraptor. This is one of the cards that I talked about in red, where the forerunner can actually ping our side of the field 1 point of damage. Polyraptor, if it gets pinged or enraged, it makes a copy of itself, and then that triggers the forerunner again, making another copy of Polyraptor until the forerunner dies. I think this card is awesome. I think this card is going to win a lot of matches, especially if we can get to that 8 mana quite well or quickly enough in Draft and Sealed. And I do think in standard, someone is probably going to make a weird like infinite deck with this, and that's going to be amazing. Even though it is 8 mana and super expensive, I just can't not see someone making a kitchen table style deck with this. Next up, we have Strength of the Pact, a 6-mana sorcery. Put 2 +1/+1 counters on each creature you control. Strength of the Pact is ridiculous. It's going to be basically your overrun, but an overrun that stays, which is amazing. So in Draft and Sealed, if you get into this and you're in green, this card is basically going to be the card that wins you the match if you have a wide board state. In standard, this card might be a brood around card, especially in a Merfolk strategy, because it does do 2 +1/+1 counters on each creature you control. That's ridiculous, guys. I know that doesn't sound like a lot, but maybe in a Winding Constrictor strategy, that's 4 +1/+1 counters on each creature you control. That basically replaces a Virtuous Gearhulk in your deck. If only it gave it trample, though. Moving on here, we have Swift Warden, a 3-mana 3/3 merfolk warrior with flash. When Swift Warden enters the battlefield, target merfolk you control gains hexproof until end of turn. In Draft and Seal, this is going to be a great way to kind of like make sure your merfolk survives against removal. And also in Standard, I feel like this card is going to be another great way to kind of survive against that early game removal as well. I think this card is probably going to be like undervalued a little bit, but a 3-mana 3/3 with flash is always going to be picked really highly, especially since it's an uncommon in Draft and Sealed. I do think this is one of the premier merfolk cards in Draft and Sealed, and if you don't get into it, when you see it and you're in merfolk, you are missing out. Moving on to another rare, we have TenderDrawd Triad, a 5-mana 2/2 Dryad with Ascend, and of course Ascend is if you control 10 or more permanents, you get the City's Blessing for the rest of the game. At the beginning of each upkeep, create a 1/1 green Sapperling creature token, and Sapperlings you control get +2/+2 as long as you have the City's Blessing. Again, Ascend is one of those mechanics that I feel like it may go off since this is kind of an Ascend enabler, creating 1/1 Sapperling creature tokens. I do think this card is really fun, but it kind of will die immediately if it's played against any kind of red deck or removal deck that's doing 2 damage to it. I think in Standard, this might be a brew around card especially. Looks like a lot of fun, and I really want to get into it, especially for Standard. But if you get into it as your rare in Draft and Sealed, I think it'll actually be okay, but there is a lot of cards you need to actually put on top of this to make sure it does survive long enough for Ascend to kind of go off. But if Ascend does go off, then this card could be insane. Moving on here, we have Thrashing Brontodon, a 3-mana 3/4 dinosaur. You can pay 1, sacrifice it, and destroy target artifact or enchantment. In Draft and Seal, this card is amazing as a 3-mana 3/4. That's good enough as it is, but having an ability to destroy a target artifact or enchantment on the battlefield is amazing as well. This is a very high uncommon pick for you if you're in green in Draft and Sealed. You'll probably want to be a first pickable almost card for you too, depending on what kind of like matchup you're going up against, you think you're going up against if you're playing in paper. And I also think in Standard, this card has a lot of potential as well to be a very good card there too. Again, giving really good utility cards on like big bodies like this really does help you, and it really does give green a lot more longevity and flexibility in the future. Moving on here, we have Thunderherd Migration, a 2-mana sorcery as an additional cost to cast Thunderherd Migration. Reveal a dinosaur card from your hand or pay 1 colorless. Search your library for a basic land card, put it onto the battlefield tapped, then shuffle your library. This is basically rampant growth for dinosaurs, and that is amazing, especially in Draft and Sealed. Again, if you're in the green strategy and you're in dinosaurs and you see this card, you definitely want to pull into it because it, 1, helps you kind of make sure you can get your lands out as quickly as possible, and 2, make sure that you know that you're in a dinosaur deck. I do think in Standard, this card will see a lot of play as well, trying to make dinosaurs very playable too. And I do think this card will definitely get there in Standard, thanks to all the great cheap dinosaurs we have in the actual set now. Again, this card is fantastic, especially if you're going into some ramp in green. Next up here, we have Wayward Sawtooth, a 3-mana 5/5 dinosaur with Ascend. You may play an additional land on each of your turns, and Wayward Sawtooth can't attack or block unless you have the City's Blessing. A 3-mana 5/5 that can block is amazing just to begin with, but a 3-mana 5/5 that makes it so you can play 2 lands per turn is ridiculous, and it's an amazing bomb. I can already see this card being a problem in Standard. This card just seems too good, honestly, for my liking. I feel like Ascend is going to go off a lot more easily, especially with this card too. And I also feel like that this card will be very, very powerful in Draft and Sealed at being a 5/5 attacker, probably on turn 4 or 5 because of you playing out all of your lands. Again, it's a great blocker on turn 3. It could be a great attacker on turn 4 or 5, and it also ramps you to be able to play out more spells on the battlefield. And that in turn ramps into your Ascend mechanic, turning on the Wayward Sawtooth. If this is your rare, you probably are going down the dinosaur path. This card is awesome. And the last card in green today, we have World Shaper, a 4-mana 3/3 Merfolk Shaman. Whenever World Shaper attacks, you may put the top 3 cards of your library into your graveyard. When World Shaper dies, put all land cards from your graveyard onto the battlefield tapped. I'm not sure how I feel about this card. A 4-mana 3/3 is kind of like just blah and not that great in Draft and Sealed, and its ability is very interesting because it does want to die basically, and it does give you a lot of ramp as well. My only real problem with this card is that it's basically milling you for 3 every single time it attacks, and sometimes your opponent kind of wants that to happen in Draft and Sealed, especially since a lot of people are just playing with 40 card decks. Obviously that idea changes in Standard, but at the same time I feel like this card has some real potential for growth in Standard, but at the same time maybe this card will just do nothing whenever it hits in the actual actual standard format. Again, Draft and Seal, this card is kind of a maybe for me. I don't really like it that much. It could be good at, like, you know, ramping you if you're in a dinosaur build, but besides that, you probably want to pass it up. It's not that great of a rare for me. But that is all the green cards in Rivals of Ixalan. I love them. I think a lot of them are really powerful, honestly. The Brontodon is super fun. I think the Swordtooth is ridiculous. And I do think dinosaurs got kind of enough support to hopefully make them a real standard threat moving forward. But of course, that's it for the video, guys. Like the video if you liked it. Leave a comment below on what you thought of the cards. I love you guys, and I will see you in the multicolor and artifact video.